Hello there, Brave Table fam. Welcome to another episode of the Brave Table. I'm your host, Dr. Neeta. And if this is your first time tuning in, a very warm welcome to you. I'm so excited today that we get to dive in. This is a solo cast, and I love these where we just kind of get to have a little mini conversation. And yes, I just dropped some really big news on social and last week. And thank you so much for voting, for those of you who voted on the book cover. And if this is your first time tuning in, well, welcome to your oasis and destination for all things being just a little bit more brave. And I dropped some pretty big news last week that we are getting closer and closer to my book. That's right. A book is coming out, my fourth book. And my very first one that is published with a traditional publishing house. And so that was such a wild ride, how that whole everything, how it all came into fruition. And if you want to learn about all of that, I actually go deep in that on episode 40, solo cast episode that I did, being brave and putting yourself out there, even through facing rejection. I talk about the entire story of me giving birth to Isla, and literally I had a call with my agent and I was still in the hospital then covering, and it was a whole ordeal. I talk about it at length in that episode. And here we are. My final manuscript is literally almost done, ready. We're picking out all of the things. Like, it's crazy. It's kind of like, decorating your house. And for those of you who don't know, Ajit and I, we embarked on our very first home together, very first home together, a year and a half in Austin, Texas. And, it's a whole thing, right? You have to figure out what kinds of decorations you want. If you are, if you have like the same style. And for those of you who don't know our background, we were nomading it for about a year and a half before we decided that LA was going to be home. And now in LA, we were very humble in terms of where we were. We had a small little place which was really cozy, really beautiful in the area of LA called Playa Vista. And it is so, shout out to Playa Vista because it is like a bubble in a bubble. And 7 minutes away, you're right next door to Marina del Rey. 10 minutes away, you're right next door to the airport, and we would fly everywhere. So it was very convenient, but it is also called Silicon Beach. Now, Silicon Beach is kind of like the Bay Area where you have all of these startups and all of the tech places are there. So it is very much like your quintessential neighborhood with, if you want to have a family and live there, it's just great. It's a beautiful area. And that's kind of where we had Ari. And fast forward, when we purchased this home, because, everything is bigger in Texas and in Austin, I had no idea what I was getting into. Like, I grew up in a high-rise building in Chicago and had never, mowed a lawn before in my life, never needed to worry about pipes bursting or water running, not running. And we're like now in the burbs. And it's such a different world. Shout out to those of you who grew up, in proper homes where you have to check all of these things and the grass. And I mean, it's just, I've been in Ajit, he grew up in a home of 23 people in Jaipur, and very different because it's in India. And in India, you have other people checking out all of these things for you. Right. And so this is a whole learning circuit for the two of us. Now, fast forward to where we are today with this book, it took us months for us to even figure out how we wanted to furnish the home, let alone, all of the decision making around rugs and around tables. And, I was pregnant, so baby stuff, and we were having a baby girl. And so, long story short, she just kind of used basically what Ari had. So, nothing sexy or really curious or interesting there. But long story short, you guys, the book process is an entire beast, and I don't want to dumb it down because it has been so sacred for me. It has been such a spiritual practice while also nursing and raising Isla at the same time. And I'm so thankful that this time around I had the most amazing collaborator, because I do run several businesses, and this was literally my outlet, my creative outlet. And one of the projects for this year was not only sharing my voice and being brave for, you know, all of us to come together and really share what's in our minds and our hearts, and why I chose to write this book, at this point. And this is really, it goes back to when I was pitching to these publishing houses. And, I'm not going to get into kind of like the how or the what, but usually you have to have a book proposal, and they ask you a ton of reasons. Well, why this book? Why now? And I think for me, and for those of you who have had children, or, have embarked on motherhood, or maybe even are thinking about motherhood, I didn't realize that motherhood would have such an effect on me creatively, where, I mean, this transition and shift from, I guess the style of leadership coaching, which is how I began after I sold my business, sold my practice, started to, sit on as different advisory for not just startup founders and, companies, but also really tying the lessons of grit and resilience. And while I'm so passionate about grit and resilience, I mean, it's really the hallmark of all of the things that I've been through, and being such an advocate for emotional health. You really don't know what you're getting into until you cross that threshold on the other side of motherhood, because it amplifies it to an entire level. And add that to, still wanting and desiring to keep your company, or perhaps even for me, getting an entire extra download of creativity and wanting to share a different side of, ambitious women, and sparking creativity in a different way post motherhood. And I know that, even many of my dearest girlfriends, when they embarked on motherhood, they kind of did the opposite. They're like, no, I really want to, share this time and be with my kids and be that woman for my be that mother for my kids, especially when they're so small. And for me, I had this like fire, this urge, this almost this like a belly of like, wow, I think these are the things I really wanted to know that nobody really was talking about in my friend circles, when I was in LA as a new mom, navigating emotions of postpartum depression, navigating emotions of, your relationship with your partner and how that fully changes, and how we needed to get extra tools just to navigate our interpersonal relationships as parents who are not sleeping, who are so used to sleeping 8 or 9 or, 10 hours a day, so used to having a 2-hour morning routine. And all of those things are just like swept taken from you. And nobody really talks about that, because still on IG, I saw some moms that I was really looking up to, they still had their morning routine. And I'm like, that cannot be true, because how are you able to do that? I mean, I probably was lucky if I was able to get that done maybe once a week. And this is to having help and support. And so this is what I really was so passionate about. And it was interesting one day, because one of the tools that I still continuously used, even in the early days of having my son Ari, was journaling. And journaling really was my way of, articulating and basically dumping my emotions onto paper. And that's literally what I had used for, that 7 or 8 years before. So I was just kind of in the throes and the heaviness and this new identity shift that I didn't really have the language for. And I didn't really have the language for until I was pregnant again with my second child. And so as I embarked on this new chapter for me as a mom, and I guess you can say it was really starting after my new chapter in my career, right? After I left, I sold my practice of dentistry, retired my license, did not, I know this is going to break everybody's hearts, but I did not renew it, right? And it was such a visceral calling of, okay, how are you going to rediscover yourself? And what does it look like? What does Neeta look like now in this lane of motherhood? And there were a lot of things that I was reconciling, as well during that time, that initial time. This was almost 4 years ago because Ari's going to be 4 in October. Can't believe it. This is my firstborn, my son. And I was also reconciling feelings of, wow, what kind of mother am I going to be like? And, I think it was also grieving the loss of my mom. And my mom had passed, gosh, I'd have to do the math. But she passed when I was 16 years old. And it was interesting to still resurface those levels of grief, knowing that I wasn't going to have my mom in the birth of my son. And there were a lot of things to grieve around having, the matriarchs in my life, my grandmother who helped raise me, my grandmother's sister who helped raise me. They had all passed within, 5 years before I was having Ari. And my main cheerleader, Bua, and you guys have all heard me talk about her before. We call her Nani because she is really the grandmother to our kids and has become my pseudo mom, but she's always been that cheerleader for me. And there were so many different elements and almost tentacles coming out of, like, the underbelly of an octopus that were coming out that was screaming, okay, how am I going to really put this on paper? And what does that really look like? And so when I started to, and this was in the thickness of the pandemic, when we were just at home having these conversations, these brave conversations, and this is really when the impetus or the idea, the spark for the Brave Table came through. The other thing that I was still journaling was, why aren't women talking about this in postpartum? Why aren't we talking about our relationships in postpartum? Why aren't we talking about the shifts and the changes? And I really wanted that to be this guide for anyone. This is not just a book about, motherhood. It really isn't, but really for all of my clients that I was helping, even at GGI, because at Global Grid Institute, we are the mental health, the emotional health hub for entrepreneurs to really help you gain your confidence, get clarity, make sure, you have your resilience, you have your grit. Because when you're starting a startup, whether it is a coaching related startup or you are, putting your ideas out there as an expert for the first time, it's scary, it's daunting. And I wanted to really marry that and bridge that gap for people to give you all permission to suck, which is why the book is called, rightfully so, That Sucked, Now What? How to embrace the joys and chaos and find magic in the mess, right? And so, I mean, what a beautiful title. And, we had gone back and forth. Mind you, this is a whole other story, but my publishers did not like the title, That Sucked, Now What? They're like, oh, it's totally not you. And I said, totally not me. I don't even know if you know who I am right at this moment. You may have known me maybe a year ago when we talked about this book, or 2 years ago, even when I even dropped the hint. But, as we all are humans evolving and changing every day, I'm a different human and hopefully a different mom than I was 3 months ago when I was reprimanding my kid for, I don't know what he was doing. But we learn. And the idea is we are evolving humans every single day. So for, God bless them, my amazing, incredible publishers, I had to really break it down to them and, really share, well, that it's not a fair assessment because we're all changing and evolving every single day. And of course, this book is really about embracing the sucky human moments that we all go through, right? It's like, that sucked. Well, now what? That sucked that I left my marriage. Okay, now what? Well, now I found an incredible, amazing co-pilot partner that has helped me build, so many amazing things, and we have two incredible children. Well, that sucked. You sold your practice, or you left the dreams of your parents, or whatever, families tend to say when you're leaving something that they're the only thing that they know. Giving you permission to start over again, giving you permission to, if you didn't like that, try something new, giving you permission to suck. If it's the first time that you're putting your voice out there, if it's the first time that you're doing something different, you are not going to be perfect. And this was really also a dialogue and a guide. And it was so cathartic for me in the early days of, having given birth to Isla. It was a very new dimension. It was not just one baby, it was two babies. And my eldest was 2.5. And, you still, at least for me and my experience, I still wanted to be able to have my own little outlet, of creativity, of identity. And of course, that was dying out again and grieving the loss of, being a mom of one child, not having as much time as before. But how can you carve out and create space and expand into what is even possible for you and all of us as we are, navigating new waters, right? And so this was among so many other things. I started to then connect the dots of, okay, this is a new phase of motherhood, and really the duality of all of the emotions. And you don't necessarily realize that, or that wasn't really clear to me, of how we can experience such duality, how we can be so extremely exhausted, yet still love and want to cuddle our babies. And that oxytocin is just so powerful that we want to be with them all day. Yet you are so viscerally tired because you've been nursing for 90 minutes up, in the middle of the night, at night, et cetera, et cetera. And, or you have something due, and you still want to get it done because that's for yourself, right? We juggle so many different things, and specifically around the chaos. And I think it's a metaphor for our life, right? We think that we've done the work, or we think we've saw one therapist, or we worked with one coach, or we saw that we did that one meditation session, or that one retreat, that one conference. Yet we wonder why the same kinds of patterns keep coming up over and over again. This is that book. This is that book. This is the book that I wanted to write for myself, for my younger self, even pre-children, as to give myself permission to suck, to give myself permission that I wasn't going to have it all together after I sold, my first business, and I was starting to climb another mountain again. I was starting to pitch myself as a leadership coach. I was starting to get my foot in the door, a lot of networking, and still getting rejections in my face because I probably wasn't that good at presenting myself, because it was one of the first times I was doing so. Right. And so even in the curriculums that I've developed and also, taught in the schools that we have, teaching our students, all of you, to have permission to suck. You are not going to be perfect. And if you are, you should be on a pedestal because that is not normal. And I'm so passionate about it because so many, and, I'm talking, I guess, to younger versions of myself, but they strive for this perfection, and it's this ideal standard that, we cannot make mistakes, but do the mistakes define you? Do the mistakes define you? And when we are, mothers, and this is coming from somebody who is like a recovering perfectionist, former type A, high achiever, strives for excellence in every way. As a mom, you just don't have time for that. And you really learn how to prioritize your energy where you're not rereading emails anymore because that does not matter. What matters is the message that you're conveying. What matters is how you're really connecting with people. What matters is how you get back from when sucky moments do happen. So this book is really giving you all permission to celebrate the chaos and find the joy, find the magic in the mess, own your stories of resilience, and really how to build your audacious resilience. And what audacious resilience, what I'm, truly defining is your ability to be unapologetic, to stand up no matter what life tosses your way. No matter if you've been, knocked it down several times, no matter if the universe is kind of like, it's not your time. Like I shared in that solo cast episode, I was rejected not 10 times, not just one round of publishers. This was 2 rounds of publishers before we ended up with, the incredible, publisher that I'm working with now. And it was such divine timing. And many times it's not that it's never going to happen. It's maybe it's not the right time. And so many of us, we take it to heart. We think it's personal. Oh, they don't want to, work with me right now. Or, oh, she just doesn't, she didn't really like me, or whatever the case is. We make our own stories up in our minds. We make our own beliefs up in our minds based on stories that we think are true, or, maybe it was an interaction. And we are so afraid of conflict. That's the other thing. We are so afraid of conflict. So what happens as a result? Well, you have this wound and you have this unresolved communication. And then there's resentment. And resentment comes because it's a form of, it's this emotion that keeps you safe, keeps you in the suck, keeps you from taking action. And so in this book, there's 3 parts to this book. The first part is embracing what the suck actually is and defining what those sucky moments are, what those intense moments are, what those tough moments in life, big, small, life-changing, tiny, in our day to day, but those moments that cause stress, those moments that cause overwhelm, those moments that keep you stuck. And then we get into the second part of the book, which is called The Bounce Factor. And in my solo cast last week, I'll put it in the show notes, we talked about and defined what the bounce factor is. And the bounce factor really comprises into 4 parts. And then in part 3, we talk about the fly forward method. And this is a framework that basically I took all of the, when I used to see one-on-one clients, and I took all of the data because, I'm kind of like a science freak at nature, and psychology is my background. That's what I got my degree in. And so I remember, as a psych major in college, in my research trials, I would, when you were doing research, you basically have a file for everyone and you're just basically collecting data and you're collecting data and you're collecting data. And what I love about the data collection process is going to be nerdy for a second, but then you get to see, not just based on emotions, but you kind of get to see what the patterns are, right? And we see that in ourselves. And so out of, the hundreds of clients that I had and the ones whose stories were similar to others, I started to collect what were their patterns as to how they were doing certain things. And I've, taught my students on how to create your own methodology about things. But for this particular book, this is how you fly forward past moments that suck, because usually we are going to have a fall or, a falling moment, which would then cause an ignition, which would then cause us to rise out of the circumstances, rise into what we are doing next. And then when we have a little bit more of that confidence, we start to magnify. And when we are magnifying, it means that we are actually, we're, we're, we're just amplifying who we are in the world, and we're really sharing our light. And then we get into that thriving stage. And thriving is when you want everyone around you to rise as well. And so those are the 5 stages of how to fly forward. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I wanted to just give you a glimpse. Like, this was so much. And what I've, combined, it's really this culmination of, this spot I've been in, the thickness. And, some of you have said you're in the thickness of motherhood. You've got 2 small children and you're writing this book. And it's also even that transition of, anyone who is transitioning careers, because I've not only had a really, hugely successful life as, had my 7-figure plus dental office. I was not even 30 at the time. And it was really honoring my superpower, my gifts of connection, my gifts of really seeing humans for who they are, being able to connect with them and seeing their superpowers, and then seeing if they wanted to come on and have this vision for, really, I mean, as how it would sound now, but really helping people transform their smiles. And I wanted to be able to do that on such a bigger level, right? And so many times, as we start to go deeper in our healing journey, as we start to go deeper in our self-discovery, as we start to go deeper and really accept what parts of us no longer we want to, take on into the next iteration of ourselves, and what parts of ourselves are dying out. Remember, I shared I had to grieve certain aspects of myself that I was no longer going to be able to do, like have my 2-hour morning, routine, where certain girlfriends who were 10 years ahead of me with their young kids, they were like, let's see how that happens when when you're in it. And I know that it's just a small, tiny bit of window, as many people say, but I think there is still aspects of yourself that you can still interweave, right? It may not be a 2-hour self-care routine or night routine every day, but maybe it is, making it juicy for 10 minutes in the morning, right? And so I talk about all of those different practices and tools and strategies to really, embrace those moments of chaos, find the joys in your life that can really activate you, that can amplify you. And I'm just so excited that you all now, finally, the secret's out. You all can learn more about the book. I'll be talking about it. We'll be answering questions. And I'm just so excited because this has been a labor of love. Literally, I had so many journals throughout the period of, 2 years between Ari and Isla. And honestly, after Isla's birth, I haven't really been journaling, which has been crazy because I've been now talking out the book. And that was a different form of expression that came up, and probably because I was way too busy. But I had people who would just interview me, and I noticed that week after week, it was literally like a therapy session and a coaching session all at the same time. But literally it was, tell me more about this and tell me more about this. And it would be, I'd be going on my walks either with baby Isla, one or like literally 6 weeks old, because this is when we started the process. And it was so cathartic because instead of using writing as an element, it was me speaking. And as my girlfriend Vasavi would say, saying it out loud. Funny enough, she's writing a book on, say it out loud too. It's so funny. But literally that process of saying it out loud weekly to articulate and write my book this time around, when I've literally had 10 journals that has encompassed just my, thoughts of writing previously. And to look back as we were compiling this book, my team and we were compiling this book, it's so vastly different, so interesting, because as I would, word vomit on like a Zoom call, we would get those transcribed. And it's just so powerful. So I can't wait for you all to get your hands on this book. I know that I think it's going to be revolutionary because it's really just so many gems of the intersection of the passions that I've been able to merge over the course of 7 years since I've transitioned into this new era, but even 4 years of, getting into motherhood. And so I cannot wait for you all to experience that. No, you do not have to be a mom to get the book, to read the book. No, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to get the book, read the book. I mean, it's really for anyone that is literally has had a sucky moment, right? And has needed to rise from a tough situation. That sucked. Now what? It's really, it's universal. And I wanted this to be that book that you could pull off your shelf, that you could read with a bunch of girlfriends, that you could, turn to whatever page and soak up the medicine that was there, and, the questions and the reflection prompts for you as just your own guide of personal transformation. So you can go ahead and pre-order the book. Oh my goodness. And when you get the pre-order copy, because it's not going to be available until early 2023, very exciting. You get a few of our really exquisite bonuses, and I'm just so proud of these. It has truly been a creative journey and a process as we've been riding this wave together. So I cannot wait for you all to learn more about it. And you guys, there's just so much more to come. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this gave you a different level and a different perspective of perhaps maybe, the bridges you've crossed and the transitions that you've had in your life, and perhaps maybe, finding ways to connect all of the stories and the obstacles and some of those tough moments. Where has that led you today? Right. And perhaps maybe some of you are so multifaceted or multi-passionate, and you're like, how could I ever merge those things together? Right. Merging motherhood and entrepreneurship with my love of, startup founders and emotional health. I mean, there's just the intersection of all of those things. And I think that we all can embrace that within ourselves. So, I'm totally cheering you on, giving you permission to suck at something new. I just tried wake surfing the other day, and I totally I totally bombed. I'm going to share that video. It might already be up actually. But it took me a couple of times, and I had so much fear, so much anxiety. I mean, it was nuts. I didn't know what to expect. I thought I was going to like bust my nose, or I have no idea. I'd never really seen anybody wake surfing before. I just knew that I loved being on the water. We were on the lake, and I was like, you know what? YOLO. Entering my 40th year, so unapologetic, that's my word. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this out. And I totally asked Ajit, hey, do you want to go? And he's like, nope, not for me. I'm like, cool. I'll be on this boat with my coach. And Coach Cam, shout out to you from Lake Austin Resort. She was so sweet. And you'll hear her. I don't know, there's a video out there somewhere, but she's like, relax your legs, relax. All she kept saying was like, relax. And how much of a metaphor is that, right? In real life, when we're trying something new, sometimes we try so hard. Sometimes we really push ourselves. And what if, what she was trying to tell me to do is like, sit back and relax, let the water take you. Because when you let the water take you, you let your feet, come up and brush up against the board, and literally the boat will, take you through the water and you'll glide over it. And I said, wow, that just sounds too easy. She's like, I know. So many people make it so complicated. And I just thought, wow, that's such a beautiful metaphor of life, that even through our sucky moments or our intense moments that we have, what if we're able to just glide through them, knowing that things are going to be okay? Obviously, we have, the tools and the strategies and things that I have obviously in this book that I've put all together. But when you just say yes to, all right, it's going to be a rocky ride, but I'm going to still stay on this board, and you'll just ride the waves no matter what comes your way. And when I shifted my perspective there, I stopped falling. I fell because I wanted to fall, not because, the wind or the water or the boat was pulling me. And that was the difference when I eased into it. And it's just such a beautiful metaphor for life. So wherever you're at, I hope this gave you a different, perspective shift on the hurdles that you've crossed. And cheers to, so many more. Cheers to embracing the sucky human moments. Go ahead, pre-order the book. It's thatsuckednowwhat.com. Thatsuckednowwhat.com. And I will see you all next time. And if you love this episode, we're always, always looking for your review. So pop one in, send us a note at support@globalgrit.co when you have uploaded your review. And I will see you guys next time. Have an amazing week. Have an amazing day, an amazing evening. And don't forget to pay it forward, to be brave for somebody else. I will see you next time. See you next time at the Brave Table.